Joining me today is Councillor at Large Anne Mahoney. So Anne, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Mark. Always happy to be here.
Always great to have you. We met, the last conversation that you and I had was right before the last council meeting of before the summer break.
Absolutely. Yep.
So there are a couple things I do want to address that happened at that last meeting. One of
I'll
those.
do my best to remember.
Well, it wasn't that long ago, but I have problems remembering what happened yesterday. So one of the things that we touched upon, kind of highlighting because we knew it was coming up, was the non-union wage increases. So tell folks how that ended up at the last meeting.
So just to give some pretext to this, we had a council meeting on April 24th, and the administration had brought in before us, it was Gardner who came in and did the presentation. And it was about a 20-minute presentation. And we received in that 20-minute presentation, at the same start of the presentation, a stack of papers and a big binder with all of the non-union employees and kind of a rundown of how they went about deciding who could get what raise and how they were looking at things. But we were getting the presentation at the same time as we got the information. So the counselors were at a disadvantage because, you know, your natural thing is to want to listen to somebody, but then another natural thing is to flip through things and look at things. And then they came time for questions, and we were asking questions, but we really weren't able to dig into the information that they gave us. And we were thinking we would have another bite of the apple. And that was April 24th. And then 2 weeks later, the budget came out, and in the budget, all of the salary raises were in the budget. So we never had that discussion. So the salaries were then pulled out of the budget to have at a later date, but they were already in the budget. So it's very difficult when something's in the budget to take it out. And at that time too, all of these numbers were, you know, people had seen their salaries, and it's very sensitive at this point, right? You're having a discussion that should have been kind of more organic and had a little bit longer time to discuss and understand. And now they're in the budget. We're taking them out of the budget and we're looking at them. And so we went through the whole budget. The budget increased, the 2024 budget increased for the taxpayers at home to know. Most other communities surrounding us went up about 3.5%. Our budget went up over 9.9%, close to 10% has gone up. And a lot of it was, you know, there's just a lot more in the budget. And one might say, well, why can't you cut them out of the budget? You can't really tell in a PDF budget what you can cut. It's a very difficult thing. It's not, again, it's a paper budget. And what we should really be doing is having those things online so that we can see really how they're building their budgets and being able to, other communities do that as well. So with the salaries, when they were in there, what I was looking for, and I went through it very closely, I noticed that the administration's office, the direct reports of the administration, were going from $125,000 to $170,000. The highest paid salary was $173,000, but it was gender inequity that was happening, because there were a lot of female employees that were not jumping the hurdle. Some of them were going up to 150, but nobody was going up to 170. Maybe one person was getting close, but as the chief of staff told me, if you're getting paid in the general fund and any other funds, such as like the COVID money or the DIF money has salaries in it, CBGB money has salaries in it. I believe the oversight fund from Quarry Hills has salaries in it. So if your salary is being bumped up in any of those places, it has nothing to do. All we're looking at is the general fund. So by that right.
So it doesn't register? It
doesn't register into our general fund. So the taxpayers, you are responsible for all of those things being paid for, especially a bond. When we take out a bond, that's like a credit card. So we're paying people via credit cards for salaries. And then those salaries, what you're getting in the general fund is you're going to be paying for their pension and their health care, but their actual salary is being paid for out of the district improvement financing or CBGB funds that we're getting from the federal government, or the ARPA funds. $1 million in ARPA funds has salaries that are going out to city employees. And we can't see that. It's not transparent into the budget. So there's no female that was making over $170,000. So there's a gender bias that's happening right now in the city of Quincy about the way they did this. And they specifically said in the paper that, you know, women, I think the outtake was that women, oftentimes women take time off because they're in childbearing years or they're caretakers, that they tried to take that across. They basically said that, but they said that they took it out of the equation. But they were pointing out the very thing that makes a gender inequity in salaries. So those are the concerns that I had, but it was also a bigger picture of this, Mark, was that Comcast money too. So I mentioned that because there was one employee that's reporting directly into the mayor's office and is registered as as an employee in the mayor's cabinet, and he's getting paid out of the Comcast money, out of the educational portion of the Comcast money. I did ask that night, does QATV get a raise? Because I know that there's Comcast money that pays for here. It's important that everybody have an opportunity to get at least a cost of living raise, right? And that's pretty much what all of our unions were getting, was a 3% cost of living raise. And this idea was that we were bumping everybody up to what they could afford to make if they were, say you were going to be a chief financial officer at a private company. But it's not quite the same thing, because a chief financial officer at a private company would probably be a CPA, and our chief financial officer is not a CPA. So there's different ways of looking at these things, and just because you're only looking at salary, and we're really looking at backgrounds of what they do, and we weren't including, because in the salary review you would usually include also, in the private sector you might get a bonus, you might get health care, you might get a 401k. In the city of Quincy, in the public situation, you're going to get health care. How much are you paying for that health care? You're going to get a pension. What are the things that we're getting? You might get stipends. You might get, because one of the questions that got brought up, like, well, the chief of police and the fire chief doesn't seem like they're going up. Their jobs are pretty important, and they're not seeing a giant jump. And they were like, oh no, because they get stipends. So there's those pieces were not part of the equation when we were doing the salary review. So I'm not sure how good that salary review would be if I can't see all of those pieces. If potentially somebody's getting paid 170 and there's dividends, there's other things that they're going to get paid extra. They might be getting close to 190. I don't know. So it's just a concern that I had. And the bigger issue is, it's not that people don't deserve the raises. I want to make sure people understand. I'm not saying that people at City Hall do not deserve raises. It's just that some people, and I use this as an example, two people I used as an example one was the HR director. Our HR director, who's in charge of negotiating our health care, who's in charge of any of the grievances that happen throughout the city, multiple unions that she has to deal with, just so many things, and then not to mention all of the other things, that the programs and things that she's putting on, and she has like financial advisory groups that she has come into, you're offered to come in to take classes for. She's just a million things that department does, and they're all very hard workers, and they're diligent, they know their background, she's been doing it for 20 years. And you looked across just the city, and you went over to the schools, and you saw the HR director in the schools, who was at one time she was a fourth grade school teacher, and then she was the QEA president, and now she's the HR director, no experience in HR at all, and she was getting paid more than our HR director in the city of Quincy. So you can do a study, go out and look at all of those things, but when I looked at that, I thought, how is it possible that this person's getting paid more than the person who's got all the training and has to do all this work? So that's how I look at things, through the lens of not just of how we're doing the study, but also just across the board. Another example would be our recreation department head. She was not, when Barry Wells first left, she was not promoted to a director's position, yet she was doing that role as a director. So she didn't get the salary increase to do the role that Barry was doing, but she was doing the job that Barry was doing after retired, and that was because they brought in the natural resources director and said, we don't need directors anymore. But she's doing the job that.
But with that said, in the budget, it was sought, and it was agreed upon by the councilors that there would be an assistant
They added
to her position.
They did. They added an assistant to her position, and I didn't cut that. At this point, there was just, you could cut and cut, and I didn't agree with the budget, so there was an assistant that was added to it, because she's doing an awful lot. Like that position in general, I don't think people understand. Like, there's a lot more than just recreation that she's doing. She's also training our firefighters in pools to make sure that they know how to rescue people. We have, when you're looking at the recreation department, she's managing probably more people than anybody else. They happen to be young people, but her staff in the summer and in the winter, she probably manages over 200 people, and she's got to keep track of them. And they're kids, so they might be coming in next week, or they might need a vacation next week. So she's got to. It's a lot of moving parts for that.
What happened years ago with, let's say, the fire department? Who did the training in the pool?
I don't think they
then?
did that. I think that came actually from an incident that happened in another fire department someplace else, when somebody went out to rescue somebody and the fireman died. And I think it was something they recognized that we could do here in the city of Quincy, and that's kind of where that came from. So it was like kind of an added bonus that we have access to a pool, and we have access to people who do training for swimming, and we could take that training and turn it around and use it to better better our services here.
Okay, so there may have been added responsibility. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is the days when there was a leader of recreation, a director of recreation, and an assistant director, but no director of natural resources. The workload was less than it is now. Is that what you're telling me?
That's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that our programs have blossomed and grown, that when she took over this job, she was not given the title of director. So she was already kind of the gender inequity. You know, she's given the job, but not the salary or the title. And you know, and then we had a salary review, and at that time she was being bumped up to, she was one of the employees that was only going to get a $10,000 raise, so she was being bumped up to 110. So some salary employees were only, some employees were going to get a $10,000 raise. That was it. They weren't going to get any more. And some people were going to go from 120 to $170,000. And some people, for that situation, I say there's some, and part of that was based because there was a benchmark that was created, right? So when we brought in the natural resources director, that at that time was the highest paid employee in the city of Quincy, higher, I think, than the mayor himself. So the benchmark wasn't that we had to go out and look at all these other places to say, are we paying people the right amount? The benchmark was that we brought one employee in and paid them a high salary, and some of the other directors, that most of the directors in the history of have been paid about the same. So your auditor and your assessor and your tax collector and your DPW director, most of them were all getting paid the same directorship job. Like that was what they were getting paid. And we did this assessment to say, well, there's different levels. And that's what they did. They did these different levels. But I think the benchmark was, and we have this natural resource person that's getting paid 170. We have these people, some of which I will say there are some departments that work extremely hard. And again, this is not saying that they don't deserve to get paid that. It's just when you look at it, when I'm looking at it, I didn't have the chance to even ask the person at Gardner these questions because I only got 20 minutes. I didn't have that question that night. It was in the budget. And it's an unfair process of the way we're going about doing these things. And it's just something that we really need to take a look at and be fair and equitable across when we're doing these things. So when somebody's getting a $10,000 raise and somebody's getting a $50,000 raise, it becomes questionable. Or somebody who was supposed to be a director but then got promoted to a director but also then only got a $10,000 raise and still wouldn't be making what the former director would have been making at that time is unfair too. And I will say when the budget came before us, I'm not sure what happened, but the director of recreational services actually went up to 116. So at least it went up, but it still was, and the HR director did not. I'm still looking across the board trying to rationalize things. Another example would be somebody that might be like a secretary that might be in one department might be getting paid $50,000 or $60,000, but the secretary in the mayor's office was getting paid $75,000. I don't have the numbers exactly, so I can't
so
promise.
Almost like a situation with HR in the school and HR for the city.
And the responsibilities, because they broke out the responsibilities, were very similar. So it's kind of like, why is one secretary getting paid a higher amount of money and a secretary in another department not getting paid another amount of money? And then another perfect example was the ARPA funds. This is the stuff that really frustrated me. So we have monies that we're paying for people that we can't see in the general fund, the taxpayers, but the taxpayers are still paying for it because you're paying for their health care. Additional people cost you more money in the budget because you're paying more for health care and more for pensions. But in the ARPA funds, the $46 million, we had $1 million of salaries in there. And one person's job title was the Director of Institutional Relations. And I read it out loud, Mark, and this is the reason why I read it out loud. I said, the Director of Institutional Relations sole responsibility is to have a relationship with our colleges, universities, and hospitals in the city of Quincy. Didn't say anything else. Didn't say our museums. Didn't say we don't have museums. So it didn't say anything else.
Oh, we don't have a hospital either.
We don't have a hospital. And how many universities and colleges do we have? 2. Eastern Nazarene and Quincy College, to which they probably both combined full-time students, not somebody who's taken one class. Combined, they probably have 1,700 students complete. And when I looked in Boston, because I Googled it, how many universities are in Boston, university colleges, about in the surround of Boston, I think there was 50 to 100, I might have that wrong, like 35 or 52, I can't remember the number exactly, but there was 152,000 students. And then hospitals, multiple hospitals. So this person's job was going to get, I forget what I think it was going from $110,000 to $130,000. And they basically could probably do it, the whole job, in 30 minutes. Maybe once a week. That's giving it a lot of generosity if they could get people to call them back. But it's $130,000 salary that is being paid for by our federal money through the ARPA fund. And I was informed, oh, that person resigned at the end of March. it doesn't matter if the person resigned at the end of March. We've been using the ARPA monies for the last 3 years. That's 3 years of salaries that this person was getting paid, and that's the job description. That's what we were paying for. And it's disturbing to me because we don't get to see these things. We got to see it because we did a salary review. Now we're seeing all these job descriptions, and they're not matching up to what I believe the salary should be. And that person was also getting a larger raise than some of the other people who doesn't exist anymore. That means, all that means to me is that, are we going to hire that person back? Another person might get a job for $130,000. I think,
Is that position taken out of the current budget?
if it was taken out of the, nope, because we can't see it, because that one's being paid for out of ARPA. So we don't have control of what the money is being used for ARPA, but that role was created and it was being paid for out of ARPA, and it was being paid, it was given a salary adjustment for the salary review, and the person's not there anymore, but that doesn't mean they're not going to replace that person, or that we'll know if that person's replaced, or if the job description changes. So I find that to be very, disturbing that we don't know. I don't know. I'm a taxpayer of the city of Quincy, but I'm also an elected official that's representing everybody here in the city of Quincy. And if I can't tell you honestly where your money is going because it's not transparent and it's not clear, and I was told by the administration, by the chief of staff, you don't have to worry about these other budgets. It's not necessary for you to worry. You only have to worry about the general fund because those monies are going to be taken care of. They just fund themselves.
Now, as public employees, not necessarily for the city of Quincy, but in any municipality, because they're public employees, wouldn't that information be available for residents of that community?
If they wanted to see, like, if Mark, how much Mark?
Sure.
So typically they'll say that they don't give out individual names. So what they might say is positions. They might give out positions. It should be, yeah. And what we didn't have that we did have in the budget this year that I will say is they actually said, usually we didn't even have the number of employees, so we actually had a column that said there's 1 employee here or 2 employees that make up this line item. That's an improvement to the budget. That's not a big enough improvement, but it's an improvement. The fact that the COVID money, though, the thing that was said that was disturbing to me was when they were mentioning the COVID money, $1 million, they were saying some of them are not full-time employees, some of them are, it doesn't matter. There's $1 million worth of salaries that are in there that none of us can see, that we don't have to worry about because it's not in the budget. That money is going to go away because the ARPA money has a shelf life. So we have 1 more year and that's going to be gone. I think looks like it's already been spent down, but they took out some extra money from the school side and they put it back into their Excel spreadsheet, because that's how they manage it, is through an Excel spreadsheet, not very sophisticated. But the thing that was bothering me was that what they said was that would be absorbed into the general budget when they run out of that money. So this $1 million worth of salaries will be absorbed into the general budget and it will be nominal to the taxpayers. So nominal to the taxpayers means you're going to get charged at home for these $1 million worth of salaries that we don't know who they are or what they're doing in the city of Quincy. And it's going to be another tax increase for you.
Or I suppose don't exactly know the timeline when they will be absorbed.
Exactly. So, but this is where transparency, this is where when people get frustrated and they'll say, we just want we want accountability of what's happening in our community. And when we look around, we see project after project starting and is that something that was approved by the city council? Was there a public hearing about it? Was there input that we had? How do I know that that you say it's my house that's costing me and my assessed value is going up, but our budget's going up almost 10%. And that other thing that happens when your budget goes up almost 10% is this really clever thing, because we only can borrow up to 6.5% or 7%, or we can't borrow anymore. That's what we say for bonding. When you increase your budget by 10%, it also lowers your percentage that you're bonding, so it opens up opportunities to bond more. So we're bonding a lot in the city of Quincy. We have a lot of projects. We have a lot of good things that are happening in the city of Quincy, but we don't really have clear insight to the financials that are happening, and it's impacting our taxpayers. People on fixed incomes are really struggling. That nominal increase to your tax increase of $25 is the difference between somebody making the choice of paying their taxes, staying in their home, buying their food, or getting their medicals, or somebody who's renting, not being able to afford to live here anymore. And we have a responsibility as a government to take care of the people who live here, because as it was once said, every constituent holds office. I mean, it's important that we take care of the people who live here. And when we are making those decisions and saying yes to these things at the city council and it's costing tax dollars money, I get really concerned because I'm not sure who I might be outplacing out of their homes or creating a financial disturbance to them. And that's my biggest concern.
And actually, a resident brought this next piece I'd like to discuss with you to my attention, and that is the administration's plan, or at least thought, to manage DCR property in the city, specifically Wollaston Beach.
Yeah. So that was just in the Quincy Sun. I mean, that was something I had heard about. So, but almost like the Ruth Gordon Amphitheater, I thought it was a rumor. I didn't trust. I mean, I thought the Ruth Gordon Amphitheater was a rumor as well, because I remember when I saw that on Facebook, I'm like, they would never do that. But in fact, they were going to fill in the Ruth Gordon Amphitheater. And then it got saved. But the Wollaston buying DCR, or not buying, they're not buying it. This is because this is what people have said to me too. We're buying Wollaston Beach. I'm like, well, we're not technically buying it, but we will be technically paying for it, which will be like buying it, because the state right now operates the beach and Furnace Brook Parkway, and there's a couple of other places. I think the Blue Hills, and then I'm going to forget the name of the park down in the beachfront down in Marina Bay. They're all run by...
So that's Squantum Point Park?
Squantum Point Park, yeah. So, and Squantum Point Park was a place that the Marina Bay people wanted to buy to put the Lone Sailor statue. So it did come up at that point, but this was in the paper saying that we want to take over control over Wollaston Beach. So in the Quincy Sun, it said control over Wollaston Beach, but it didn't say, they said that we're not sure about the roadway, Quincy Shore Drive, just Wollaston Beach. And it didn't go into detail other than we have the infrastructure, no idea of how much it's going to cost, have no idea what the impact would be to the taxpayers of the city of Quincy, but it's just something that the city wants to do. And my concern with this is that we don't know this. First of all, the state has bonds on the beach, so if we're going to take something over, we're going to take just like Quincy College. If we're going to give Quincy College to the state, they're going to have to take some of the things that we have absorbed into the state, and it becomes a very mathematical equation of how are we going to do this so it can be equitable for the state to do it. And that the answer back we had from Quincy College is, well, the state doesn't want to do it because, you guys, you've got to figure out your medical and your pensions and everything else, which can be done. Well, in this situation, we're saying, you know what, we want the beach, we want Wollaston Beach, and the state has bonds on those things, so we'll absorb those bonds, and that was being paid for at the state level, shared throughout the whole state. 351 communities are paying for all of these things, by the way. Quincy's going to take those bonds and bring them into Quincy and the beach, and then take control of that. That's going to be another hit to the taxpayers of the city of Quincy, and we don't know what that's going to be. And it's just discussions that hasn't actually gone forward. It's just something that was in. But I think the administration was also on the Joe Catalano show this morning, and he was talking about the beach. Like he was going to take over the beach, and he was going to take over the road because they don't have the lights, and he was talking about the trash and different things. But what I think is interesting is we have a new governor, Maura Healey, and she just appointed a new DCR director, which is the former mayor of Revere. And in Revere, he was able to get many of the things that we're talking about here in Quincy at Wollaston Beach done at Revere Beach. And I think it's important. I'm not sure how to say his name. I think it's, I brought it with me just because I don't want to, Brian Arrigo. He's just started, and I know Maura Healey's increased the DCR budget by about 12%. But what you have now is you have somebody who's running the DCR, who has municipal experience, that knows the challenges of a coastal community, that understands what the needs are for our parks and our resources that they have at DCR that we can work with. And that's what I prefer to see happen, rather than us taking back something and making it part of something that we have to do. We have so many things that still need to be done in Quincy. We have roadways that you can drive through Wollaston Cemetery and it's a great ride, but if you drive next to Wollaston Cemetery on the Southern Artery or RC Street, it's technically you're going to have to probably realign your car first before you can drive that. So there are things that we have to do in Quincy way beyond before we start taking on extra debt for things that we don't control right now. But we could be working much better with our state and delegation to be able to take care of those things.
You're talking about an active area there at Wollaston Cemetery, of course. Across the street is the public safety headquarters.
That's in the process of being built. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it is a tricky place down there because there's a lot of activity that's going on. But the public safety headquarters, I think, is on schedule. I believe it's on schedule. So, and that is kind of, it's been in the works for a long time. And I'm excited to say that process is going to be done, hopefully, I think in the next 2 years. They say it's going to be done in the next 2 years. The interesting thing is we have that going on, and then we have Wollaston Cemetery's gate area going on. And the interesting thing is that the wall that's going to be around the police station is going to mimic the wall at Wollaston Cemetery. So I think the view when you kind of come around those two will be very aesthetically pleasing. the unfortunate part is that they took the wall out of Marymount Park, on the Marymount Park side, the Wallaston Wall, and that's not as aesthetically pleasing. So it's too bad that we can't somehow be able to, help the Wallaston Cemetery make that fix. But those are two different projects. One is being paid from opera funds. It's another project that people are somewhat frustrated with because there was no public process for that either. It was just, kind of announced and it's being done. That's the cemetery. But the police station, I know, it's on schedule and it's moving along.
We should mention that we do have a new police chief.
We do.
Chief Mark Kennedy. He's the 18th in the city of Quincy.
Mm-hmm.
He will be chief when this is completed.
He will be. So Chief Keenan just retired, which it seems kind of amazing. We were doing the 4th of July parade, and all of a sudden it was like, Chief Keenan wasn't there, and Chief Kennedy was. Chief Kennedy's, I think he's a perfect pick for the situation. He's a young chief, and we have a very young police staff. So I think it's going to be a very good connection that he'll have with those young cadets, people that are coming in to be new police officers. And there's a lot of people who are retiring too from the police force too, but he has a lot of respect. I think there's a lot of people who are working in Quincy Police Department that he had a lot of respect of them, and I think it's going to be it's a good fit for the city of Quincy, and I'm looking forward to working with him.
And he's an attorney, so he certainly comes at it I guess from a different perspective.
Yeah, I think I think it's a benefit to be able to have somebody that actually understands the law as well as he's a law enforcement person as well. But again, I think, Chief Keenan had been there for a while. He did a great job. It's a great opportunity for the Quincy Police Department with a new leader to be able to kind of, as I said, there's just been a lot of new police officers in the last couple of years. And when you're looking around and you're seeing some of the police officers that retired, and you're kind of saying, I didn't think they were they're ready for retirement because some of them retired at a younger age than 65. But it's a hard job. I don't think people understand. Policing is a very difficult job. It's taxing on your family. It's taxing on yourself. I know that they do a lot of details, but that's another thing. When they're doing details, that's extra work that they're doing. It's a long day for some of these, and I thank them for the services that they do.
Absolutely. We thank them as well. And we've come to the end of this program. We certainly can have you back. There were other topics I'd like to discuss, but the half hour went by fast.
It always does, Mark. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you at home for watching, and please continue to watch Quincy Access Television for more locally produced programming.